This time last year, we were thinking, weren't we, about what it was going to be like to be part of the School of Radical Discipleship. And I hope we got across our heart that the school is not a kind of intellectual one. It's not about getting information or understanding. It's not particularly about skills either. It's not about learning new ways of doing things. The school is about trying to follow Jesus more closely. That our faith, our trust, our belief in God will make a difference in our lives, in the lives of those around us. I'm so bored of being a dull, I don't see Jesus, I don't know Jesus, I don't see him at work, Jesus Christian. I don't want to be like that. And I know that I am, and that's why I want to keep on trying to follow Jesus. I want my family to be transformed. I want our society to be transformed. I want relationships that I know that are broken to be transformed. I want our church to be transformed. I hate it that our church is a mockery, that people ignore it or lampoon it or think that it's just a place of horror rather than beauty. Why we're here is that we would be transformed as we follow Jesus. But the disappointing thing, looking back over the last year, is that you may have realised that this life, this school, is just the introduction. It's just the prologue. It's just the opening scene, that actually we're just getting started on this. We're just taking baby steps. You know, you are a very gifted lot. You have loads of gifts. You have loads of experience. You've done amazing things for God year after year after year. But I suspect that if you're honest, you know that you are still just taking baby steps in following Jesus. And that's okay, because one day we will get to be with him for all eternity. But for now, we just keep on following. So this has been the prologue, the introduction. But I want my prologue to be as good as possible. When I was working for the police, I worked as a police community support officer, and I had some training. I think it was 5 or 6 weeks up at Hendon Police College in North London. And on the training, we learnt how to give first aid, how to defend ourselves, how to understand the law a little bit. We learnt about directing traffic and stopping traffic, very important. But you know, being a police community support officer was not those 5 weeks of training. It was when I got out on the streets. Do you remember a few months ago, I quoted John Wimber, and he used to say that the meat was on the streets. I'm sorry if you're a vegetarian, but what he meant was the really meaty stuff, when our faith gets exciting, isn't on church. It's not listening to a sermon. That's not the best thing of our faith, however good it may be. The best thing of our faith is not singing an amazing hymn. The meat of our faith is day after day following Jesus, 166 hours of our week. Yeah, often we spend 2 hours or so each week in church, and I think it's great. The church has realised that we need that. We need, as it were, training every single week. We know that our faith leaks, and we know that we need to, as much as we can, gather together, encourage each other, inspire each other, encourage each other on in following Jesus for the rest of those hours when we live out our faith. And maybe if church is our weekly training, then the school has been a booster class. Not that you needed a booster class, but you wanted a booster class. You said, I want to grow more in following Jesus. And I'm so glad you've been with us on this year. But for now, the classes are over. So what comes next? We're going to look at the example of Jesus. Here we go. 4 things. The 4 ways that I would suggest we can keep on following Jesus. The first one is choosing humility. This is the foundation of what I believe it is to follow Jesus. Humility is not acting or believing that we have nothing to offer. that we're worthless or unimportant. Humility might be that we know that we have more to offer than all those around us, but yet we choose to take the lower seat, the less important, less glory-filled position. We give others the glory, the significance and the credit. You know, when you look at leaders, you know what makes a good leader? Somebody who can inspire you with the great things that they've done. But a godly leader doesn't need to inspire you with the great things they've done, because they might actually not get very much of the credit. They will be encouraging people, building people up, training and equipping people. Jesus knew that we are so easily tempted by pride, and that's why he spoke a lot about humility. I'm going to read from Luke 4. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. I suspect they were worried that Jesus might mess up their comfortable lives, or their pride might be knocked. There in front of Jesus was a man suffering from an abnormal swelling of his body, and Jesus asked the Pharisees and the experts in the law a reasonable question: is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? But they remained silent. They remained silent because they could end up looking really stupid. They had no humility. They weren't ready to say, "Oh, I've got it wrong." So taking hold of the man, Jesus healed him and sent him on his way. And then Jesus asked them, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And they had nothing to say. Again, why would they not have got in with this discussion? And when he noticed how they were. He noticed how some people wanted the more important place at the table. He told them this parable: when someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. And you can imagine them thinking, more distinguished than us? Do you ever feel like, I deserve some of the credit, some of the recognition? And if so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give this person your seat." Then, humiliated, you'll have to take the least important place. But when you're invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. What? Those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. That was completely countercultural 2,000 years ago, and it is today. Nobody promotes that humility. And then Jesus carried on. He gave the example: if you give a meal, invite those who have no ability to benefit you back. I'll look at that more in a moment. Jesus modeled this humility, and I love the way his PR was rubbish. He really hadn't got the right PR company, because when he healed somebody, a miracle had happened, something really amazing. He would say to the person who's healed, "Don't tell people." That is rubbish PR. But Jesus, for some reason, seemed to value humility, not lording it over others, even though he really could. So what can we do? A few things. Firstly, don't take the credit. Don't hunger for the appreciation of others. Can we do that for good things? Can we say, "Actually, I don't need to take the credit"? Can we choose to associate with people who don't help us look better or more important? In fact, Jesus did the opposite. He ate with people who everyone said would make him look worse. It didn't work out, but that's what he did. Can we do that? Can we associate with those who are going to have no opportunity to make us look better? Thirdly, can we let others win? No one wants to be a loser. But Jesus, he could lose. He could lose his life. And he would do it willingly that others might win. Can we do that? It's countercultural again, isn't it? It's crazy. No one's going to recommend it, but Jesus models it and instructs us to follow him in a life of humility. He says those who want to gain their lives, which is obviously good advice, will lose it. But those who are willing to lose their lives will gain. Be willing to lose and see what will happen. One more thing. Do the things that no one sees or values. No one sees or values but are good and important. Do those things, the way of humility. Okay, now take a minute and those 4 points will come up on the screen. Take a minute and think, which of these do you find hardest? And which of these do you feel like God might be saying you should do more of? And it might be the same one, they might be different. Write them down in big writing on a piece of paper, on one piece of paper for both of those, as big as you can, as few words as possible, and I'll give you a minute or so to do that. Okay, your minute is up. Keep those pieces of paper, we'll use them in a little while. The second way to keep on following Jesus. Humility is the foundation and this builds on it. And they will get quicker. The second one is love. What I mean is see people, treat people like Jesus would. If our foundation is choosing insignificance, choosing to lose, that's us, then how do we treat others? We've already touched on this. Jesus wasn't a people pleaser. He was a people blesser, a grower, a nurturer, a challenger. He cared for others. Remember, he didn't need to worry about himself. He knew who he was. We know who we are. So he loved others for others. He talked about others with love. He served others with love. Our biggest problem is that we put ourselves above others, and that never works out for good. But if we start with humility, then our position can't be threatened. Our power doesn't matter. We can just love others. Do you see why humility is a beautiful foundation? So what did Jesus do? He encouraged. He said, "You are my rock, Peter." He knew that Peter was flaky. Peter was going to fail, but he said, "You are my rock." He made this group of ragtag teenagers, probably teenagers, nobodies, insignificant people. He made them believe that they could change the world, that they could build the church, and they did. He was a good encourager. Give people practical encouragement. I like the way you did that. I like that you did this and that did that. It helped me in this way. Practical, real encouragement. Jesus saw the best and treated people as their best. But he didn't pretend that anyone was perfect. Jesus wasn't just an encourager, he was an honest person about our failures, our weaknesses. A good friend tells us when we mess up. We just need to trust them. So take a moment, have a think. How is God challenging you? What do you find hardest about loving people? Is there one particular word that summarizes what you find hard? And another word or a few words about what God might be calling you to do. And again, you'll have a minute to do this. Write it on a piece of paper in big words, as few words as possible. And we'll come back in a second. Do keep a hold of that piece of paper. The third way to keep on following Jesus is to be obedient. Luke 22, Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and he then withdrew about a stone's throw beyond his disciples, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, but yet not my will, but yours be done." Maybe it was easier for Jesus to be obedient being the Son of God, but I suspect it was actually quite hard because Jesus had some hard ways in which he had to be obedient. Being tortured and suffering and rejected and hurt and even dying on a cross. Obedience was hard. Obedience is hard for us. I wonder, can we be obedient? We have to listen to be obedient to God, don't we? We have to hear from him. We can't be obedient in doing what we're told if we don't hear from God. But actually, I find obedience much harder than listening. If you love Jesus and you love people, and I know you do you love obedience? Do you love doing what God says? Come what may, over and over and over again. When there might not be no glory, there may be no even reason for you to understand why you need to do it, but yet we will be obedient. God calls us to obedience, and when we are obedient, it's like we are lining up with the kingdom. We're lining up with what God wants. We're stepping into the way that he would have things be. We never do it perfectly, but at least we get to be closer. You know that obedience is easy when God says, take a holiday and here's the money for it. Or when God says, love this person and you love them already and you find them an easy person to love. Or God says, give this away and you already have the thing to give. But obedience is hard when God says, love this person and actually they're hurting you. When God says, be generous and actually you're not sure if you're going to have enough. When God says, do this, and you fear that it might work out for bad, that's when obedience is hard. Take a moment, one word. Again, a few words. One word, where do you find this hardest? Where do you find it hardest to be obedient? And then one word or a few words of where might God be calling you to be obedient? Might be the same thing. Again, you've got a minute for this. Write it on a big piece of paper, and then we will come back. Do keep hold of that piece of paper. Lastly, the fourth way of following Jesus is to live with courage. Don't forget all the others are the foundations: humility, love, obedience. What I mean by courage is stepping out in faith with God. God did not make us to be afraid, did not make us to sit on the sidelines of life. The lost are dying, the sick are hurting, the church is a mockery. We need to have courage. Who else will be the people, when somebody is ill, who will come alongside them and pray with them that they may know God's love? When somebody is confused and lost and thinks that Jesus has nothing for them, who will be the people who can give them hope and direction but us? The people that know God, know his love, are filled with his courage. This is where it gets exciting. Courage means our faith and our belief goes from good ideas and hopes into amazing things happening. We get to see miracles. We get to walk on water. We get to see God do amazing things. Let me finish. I think that following Jesus is about humility, love, obedience, and courage. But I also think that it's about falling. I love the example of Buzz Lightyear from the first Toy Story film. And Buzz is a plastic toy, and he has the belief, the unfailing conviction that he can fly. And he cannot, because he is a plastic toy, but he can. Because what he does is he trusts and he falls, and as he falls, he flies. And that's a bit like us with God. We trust, we choose to try and follow him. We choose to be obedient. We choose to be courageous. We choose to be loving. We choose to be humble. And we don't do it. We fail to do it. We do it a little bit. And we mess up and we fail and we fall. But as we fall, we are falling towards Jesus, closer to Jesus. I want to fail. I want to fail big, but I'd rather do that than not have tried at all. I want to fall towards Jesus. My experience is that when we try to get things right, it does not work out. Maybe you believed this kind of half-truth in the past about your being a Christian. You believe that you need to know the right things, you need to have faith in the right things, you need to trust in Jesus. And then, like having all those ducks in a row, everything would work out okay. And if you've believed that, you've also realized that it doesn't work out like that. That even though we have the right beliefs and we have the right trust and we try to do the right things, members of our family who we want to be saved are still lost. Those who shouldn't need to suffer still suffer horribly and die. We know that it doesn't work all out. I think it's a bit like we live with one foot in the pain and the suffering of this world, our foolishness, our stupidity, and that of the world around us, and one foot in heaven, one hand, as it were, clinging onto Jesus. For now. We know that in time, as we trust in Jesus, one time for all eternity, we will be with him. But for now, we're in that place. Following Jesus is having our foot in the world and in heaven, in a place of suffering and of hope, and is failing to be obedient and courageous and loving and humble, but failing again and again and again. I wonder, could we do that? Next year, we hope to have an opportunity for those who would like to make a kind of group commitment to say and think practically, how can I live with humility? How can I live with love? How can I live with obedience and courage? to practically, make a commitment to doing that as a group. It may just be me. It can't really be me committing on my own. So hopefully one person also will be able to commit to that. But for now, maybe for the rest of the year, you might want to make a commitment as well, saying, I'm going to try and live with humility, take the position of less importance and less power. I'm going to try and live with love. I'm going to try to treat people as Jesus would treat them, even when that's hard. I'm going to try and be obedient. I'm going to listen to God, and when he says something, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to live with courage. That I would see Jesus at work as I step out in faith. Let me pray, and then we will come back together. Holy Spirit, may you fill us. For those places, those times where we find it hard to be humble, break our hearts. When we find it hard to be loving, change us, change our attitudes. When we are so disobedient, may we become obedient to what you would have us do. May we have courage. May we fail to do all these things and know that you love us and welcome us and accept us.